Good morning and welcome to the LBJ Grasslands in Alvord, Texas, near Decatur. This morning we're going to be doing a Land Nav exercise. This particular exercise is in primitive or basic land navigation. We'll be navigating a series of tasks today without the use of map, compass, GPS. I'm also going to add one additional constraint, and that is I have no writing material. I would normally make detailed ingress maps in an activity of this nature, but we're going to presume that we also have no writing material as well. Now, these are techniques that I use regularly in the course of search and rescue, and in fact it forms the foundation of all my land nav activities. I'm hoping that many of these techniques will be useful to you at some point in the future because, well, things happen. Maps can be lost, people get separated from their gear, gear can malfunction. In the case of compass, which is my go-to navigational aid, compasses can be affected by many varieties of magnetic interference, and you won't even know that the readings are unreliable. You'll just take a bad reading and that will result in a bad decision, which could put you in a situation. GPS is subject to a number of issues of its own, including moving from areas to where you have sufficient satellite lock into areas in which you do not. Atmospheric conditions can affect GPS. There are even situations that can affect the accuracy of the signal. As a drone operator, I have to be constantly keeping up with things like KP index. Devices can lose power. There are lots of things that can happen that we would just chalk up to Mr. Murphy and his law. And I can tell you one thing, Mr. Murphy really loves the wilderness. So let's get to the first task at hand, which is from the position that I'm at. I want to find the Valley View campgrounds. Now, the only thing that I know about Valley View is that they're roughly north of the Piney Woods campgrounds. And the reason I'm facing predominantly in this direction is that this is the trail leading out of the Piney Woods campgrounds. But I don't know where north is. Now, you can look at the day we have and say, oh boy, it's a bright, sunshiny day. We can use the shadow stick method. And that's a go-to method. It's well documented online. You can do a Google search. You may have even gotten one of those survival videos that talks about the shadow stick method. We're not going to use that right now because at this time in the morning, the sun is casting excellent shadows, but it's also casting very long shadows. So we're going to temporarily presume, and this can happen to you in territory, that you can get the right gear and you can get a shadow, but the length of the shadow exceeds the amount of ground that you have to work with. So I want to show you a backup technique. This backup technique requires one critical piece of gear, and that is an analog watch. Not one of those fancy iOS or Android smartwatches. This is my Marathon Navigator. It does the one and only one thing that I require of a watch. It tells time. It does it very accurately. It's very rugged, very reliable. Also has a bi-directional bezel. So what I'm going to do, you can look this method up online. I'm just showing it to you as an alternative to shadow stick, is point the hour hand towards the sun. Video may not look very good right now, but I'm going to point the to the sun. You may not be able to see this very well. Okay, there we go. That's a pretty good line. It's morning, so I'm going to go clockwise to the 12 o'clock mark, bisect that angle. I can just kind of rough this, and already I know that that's my approximate direction of travel. I'm on this upslope. I know I'm going to have to go through these gates here, so while I'm putting my watch on, I'm going to have to go through all that to get some more information. The other thing I'm doing is I'm looking around for other terrain features I might be able to exploit. I don't know if you can see it on the chest cam because we're looking kind of back into the sun. There's also some trees kind of blocking my view, but I've got these two comm towers off to roughly, I'm guessing, maybe east, a little southeast of my position. I can make frequent use of those. Now, I can't see a lot of detail about them because I'm looking kind of back into the sun, but from here I can tell the left one, the small one, is to the left of the large one. So all of this is information that I can use throughout the course of navigation. So let's get across these gates and then we'll see what I'm up against. Well, made it through the gates and there was a trail, and for just a few seconds it looked like that trail was headed in the right direction. I thought, wow, it's all over but the walking. Then you can see kind of from my shadow here, this trail took a more or less left turn and now it's heading off, you know, roughly westward. I don't think I can ask these cows the right direction, so it's always important to have a plan. And so the working plan is I'll invest maybe 100 or 200 yards in this direction. You know, maybe this trail turns around and heads back in a more favorable heading, or maybe it intersects with something. I can't tell from here. Just my working plan is no more than 100 to 200 yards. And if I don't get an indication of the correct direction, well, maybe I should not have lost my map. Okay, let's see what happens. Well, it didn't take too long to come to this, I guess I'll call it an intersection. You can see there's a little remnant of a pond out here. It's kind of interesting. I mean, everything looks kind of like it's the same color. Imagine being out here at night. You could walk right by an area like this, especially since the ground is brownish, the trails are brownish. Now that keeps heading off roughly the direction that I came in. This is the first indication of something that might actually be going in the correct direction. I'm going to make a rough guess that this is north by northeast. Now, I don't know if we need to be going north by northeast, north by northwest. So the working plan is I'm going to have a time or a distance budget. I'm going to say maybe 500 yards. And this would really better be working out at that point, or I'm just going to turn around and backtrack. And again, it's quite possible that I need to go this way. You can see it's already making a turn to the, you know, maybe it continues going on out by the cows there and straight into Valley View. At this point, we just don't know. So the other thing I need to do, in case I need to backtrack, is mark this area. The ground's fairly soft, so a simple mark is just to drag your boot and make an arrow. Now, it is possible that horses could come along and erase that, but they probably won't erase the entire mark. I don't have any rocks around. If I had rocks, I could make rock markings. There's also one other thing that you can do to find out if you actually came along a path. So I'm going to ask you a question. When you're out in the wilderness like this, what's the most important animal you need to be able to track? You know, is it predator animals like wolves and bears? Is it game animals? Actually, the most important animal that you need to be able to track out in the bush is you. And it's kind of amazing that people who can tell you the difference between a coyote trail and a wolf trail don't even know what their own footprints look like. So learn to memorize what your footprints, what your boot prints look like. If I come back along this area and my mind is just telling me to go that way, but I want to know, did I come in this way or did I come in this way? The ground is soft enough that it should be able to leave boot prints. If it's not, make a mental note of that. And so that can be an additional check on whatever other markings you leave. But for now, I'm just going to go ahead and leave an arrow in to the waypoint and an arrow, a nice long one, out of the waypoint. Plan is 500 yards in this direction. I can also, while I'm getting started, I can now start using these comm towers. If this is a valuable path, then I'm going to try to establish boundaries to the east and to the west. So for my east boundary, I want to keep those comm towers behind me and off to the right. If I see them in any other orientation for any significant amount of distance, that's bad news. If I see the comm towers behind me and to the left, I've drifted off way too far in a westerly direction. So we're going to use those comm towers now to establish boundaries, and let's see where this path leads. So we're out about 500 yards. Comm towers are just barely behind me and to my right when I'm facing in the direction of travel. I'm looking at the shadow that the sun is casting, so I'm kind of, you know, roughly west, so this trail is still working out. I might say it's barely working out. I can also use the position of the sun. This is near mid-December, so the sun is inclined very heavily to the south, so it should be mostly on my back side during an outbound path. So the updated plan is to continue investing in my current direction of travel, and I'll check back in later. So this is interesting. I've come to an intersection here. I'm not quite sure what that structure is. I don't know. It's a wooden monolith. The aliens have finally visited Texas. Other features are I just passed a pond over here. This is why, if I had writing material, I would record all of this information on my ingress map. I'm not going to point back into the sun. Comm towers are still behind me to the right, but they're a bit more to the right than I thought they would be. That tells me I've drifted maybe a little bit more eastward, but I can see this trail moving off to the left ahead, so I'd still say it's in the general direction I want to go. Also, if I was facing due north, I don't know that I am. This would be a great place to try the shadow stick method. I'd probably have to end up using my walking stick, try to jam that into the ground and get a couple rocks. I don't have any sticks around, but this is great open, relatively flat territory for using that method. And so let's just say hypothetically that I determined north was off kind of in that direction, which is where I think it is. Again, we can use the sun. So throughout the day, with the sun mostly behind me, I'm going to expect my shadow to kind of go like this. So the fact that my shadow is right over here tells you I still think I'm heading in approximately the right direction, so I'm going to continue investing in this trail, but just remember our wooden monolith. So I moved about 100 yards from our previous position, and you notice two new comm towers have appeared. These are not the same comm towers as before. The ones that we were using for reference are actually back in towards the sun. I'm not going to point in that direction, but it's very easy to get confused, so pay attention to your surroundings constantly. The other thing I'm doing is every 100 yards I'm making, I don't know if you can see it on the chest camera, I'm making a hash mark so that, again, this ground is relatively packed. It's not leaving very good tracks at all. So I can't use my own boot prints as a reference, but I can use these hash marks every 100 yards as confirmation if I have to backtrack along this path. Oh God, there's that monolith again. Okay, I'm starting to get a little scared. Let's get out of here. Well, there's an old saying, I'd rather be lucky than good. It appears that my investment in this trail paid off. Ahead of us we have the Valley View campgrounds. I'm going to go up here, sit down, hydrate, take a brief rest break, and then we'll get on with part 2 of the exercise. All right, we're heading out of Valley View. One thing I really noticed is that campgrounds turned out to be a little bit more northeast than I might have originally expected. I kind of had north on the brain. Definitely much further northeast than I was originally led to believe. So I'm going to use this opportunity to kind of reset my orientation. The comm towers are actually kind of off in this direction. And then looking at the shadow cast by the sun, that's actually giving me a fairly good east, maybe a little east by southeast direction. I would have thought comm towers would have been more in this direction, but I was wrong. So I'm resetting. The other thing you can do, I'm not going to point back into the sun. I've noticed that the shorter comm tower is still to the left, but I'm close enough now to get some detail. It actually is painted red, white, red, white. One of the things you can do is I noticed that from this position, red, white, red covers almost exactly one thumbnail. The other thing I noticed is that the distance between the two comm towers was about 2 knuckles on my index finger. I can use those two pieces of information to lock down a very specific position and orientation relative to my current start point, which is Valley View, which is behind me. So as I'm heading out here, you notice I've got this fork or this branch coming up here. One of the issues that you'll have, particularly when you're coming the other direction, you see the campgrounds, and boy, you start focusing on the campgrounds and you forget to look around you. I always recommend every time you stop, take time to look behind you. Every time you exit a waypoint, look behind you, get a mental snapshot. So from here, where do we go? I could ask people this question. A very common answer would be, well, I walked straight into Valley View, so I must walk straight out. Well, I don't know if you remember, you can go back and rewind the video. One indication we could use is that when I showed you Valley View, I was actually in the shade. There's only one orientation that gives me shade right now, and it's this way. If you had really been paying attention, you would have noticed that we actually walked more like this into Valley View. So if I was going to do an out and back, I would want to take the left fork. This is also where I'd be on the lookout for these merge or branch trails. I would make this a waypoint and leave a marker, and then use my marker to determine, okay, I came in this direction. So the next task in front of us is we want to see, is it possible, I know I can do out and back. That's literally one trail and one turn, and that gets me back to my truck. Now the challenge is, can we go a different direction? And let's see if we can navigate a loop. I don't know, man, I may be completely full of it. I may go 500 or 600 yards in this direction, and I may have to turn around and backtrack. Now, before I sign off, I've mentioned yardage several times, 100 yards, 500 yards, 600 yards. How do we measure that? Well, yardage is estimated via pace count. I'll give you the Cliff Notes version. Number of paces in 100 yards. You can measure this on a football field. And then we measure off 100-yard segments with Ranger beads. 100-yard, these can be 500 or 1,000-yard segments. In classes I teach, I'll show you what to do if you don't have Ranger beads. And man, they're like $9 or $10 on Amazon. Go get some. So as I head out, I'm going to expect that whatever loop I'm going to take will take me probably westward for a while. Then I'll work my way back south and east. So I know what my relative orientation should be to the sun as it goes east to west during the day. And I can also use the comm towers, which are now just behind me and to the left. So I'm going to use the comm towers and the sun to keep myself rooted relative to Valley View. Let's go see what's in this direction. So here we are at a branch. Which way do I go? Well, of course, I don't have a map or any other indication, so the answer is, at first, I don't know. This looks like it keeps taking me out in kind of a southwesterly direction. Another piece of information I can get is I've been feeling the wind in my face. And before I even came out here, I checked the prevailing wind direction. So this direction is heading out, looks like it circles back to the left. That heads more in the direction of the sun. So that would lead me to believe that this direction would go out along the lines that I came in. We could, invest 10 or 15 yards here. I apologize for filming directly into the sun. I might just go out here a little bit. Oh, look, there's my, oh my God, it's the dreaded wooden monolith. Remember, we passed that on the way in. So I would imagine that this is a little trail that takes me back to that intersection. In fact, if I wanted to shortcut my way back and just go directly back to where I came in, I'm willing to venture that we just go this way. We'll run into that intersection. I'll have a mark left there because that was a waypoint, and then I could follow that path all the way back the way I came in. But for now, stay away from the wooden monolith. I'm going to go the other direction, see where that leads. But I'm definitely marking this intersection point here, this merge path, as a waypoint. And so I'll mark, you know, the in direction, and then I'll mark the out direction. So if this turns out to be a total bust, a total dead end, I now believe I don't have to backtrack all the way to Valley View. I can backtrack to here and shortcut my way back. Well, here we go again, about 400 yards. In fact, when we get to that tree up there, it'll be almost right at 400. Another decision. This is kind of good news, bad news. On the one hand, finally we have some sort of a marking. It looks like orange and blue. I mean, if we knew nothing about the grasslands, we might say, well, that's some sort of a named or marked trail. But damn, it keeps leading me further and further and further out west. I mean, this loop idea is probably starting to become really crazy. Now, this looks more like a mowed maintenance trail. You know, this is something like, you know, the U.S. Forest may create these to just, you know, help them cut across. You know, there may be another one out there. This could lead nowhere, it could lead somewhere. For purposes of the exercise, my current plan, I'm going to invest 200 or 300 more yards in this direction. If I don't see some sort of hope, I'm going to backtrack just using my pace count back to this waypoint. So again, I'm going to mark a waypoint here, proceed for another 2, maybe no more than 300 yards. If this doesn't start showing something, I could backtrack to here and give this a try. And if this doesn't work, I can backtrack to my other shortcut. So let's see what happens. So 350 yards, we made a huge loop. We went out almost due west, came back almost due east. Now it looks like I'm headed just kind of on the basis of my shadow southwest or south by southwest. But notice this trail is picked up a bit more of a westerly bias. However, we have this orange marker up here, so we're on something that we might surmise is a named trail. 350, maybe put a few hundred more yards into it, but I better start seeing a turn back eastward pretty soon, or I'm going to get really nervous. All right, finally, at long last, we started moving back in the right direction. The sun is in a much more favorable orientation. I've actually got a bit of a path that goes off to here, and my God, look at that. There's a road, there's gates. Was that where I came in? You know, one of the things that'll happen to you out here is you'll see things and your mind will immediately try to do a pattern match. You know, your mind wants to be comforted. And so the very first thing it'll try to do is convince you that that's the gates you came in on. Well, the gates that I came in on, think about what the orientation of the sun was. I should, if that's the road, I should be able to follow the road, and just on the other side of the road is the comm towers. The sun's still way over here, so I don't really have corroborating information. That's probably another road. In fact, my general feeling is that we haven't gone far enough yet. We vectored so far south and west, and notice that we have this mowed path going off. We came in from that direction. There's a mowed path. I'm starting to think that that mowed path I saw way back over there probably leads back through here. I don't know that for sure. That's just speculation. So we're going to continue. It looks like this trail branches off, and then we'll continue going in this direction. Again, I'm going to mark this as a waypoint, because if this direction doesn't pan out, I'll backtrack Roads are lifeline. If I find a road, I can get almost anywhere from a road system. I'd rather be lost in a road system than lost out in the middle of a bush. So we're going to go this way and see how it works out, but at least we're headed back towards the right direction. Oh my, finally. It took a while, but our comm towers have come into view. Starting to get a little worried. We remember from when we came in, we go just along the road to the east, a little east by southeast. Those comm towers are kind of just on the other side of the road, you know, from the orientation that I was looking at. So we can kind of speculate, given the position of the sun, time of day, it's just about 1100. So we could form a pretty high probability speculation that that road I want to run into right off there. And the path here, well, now I picked up another marker, a blue. So, I mean, all this is doing is confusing me. So let's stick with our basic land features. And this path looks like it's headed off in that direction. So I'm going to continue investing in this direction of travel. Otherwise, I'm going to have to do some backtracking. But just picking up the comm towers was a really good, a good feeling. Oh boy, here we are, another decision. So I got a bunch of markers that way that are blue, one that's orange. I have another one that's this way, and it's orange. I mean, what kind of an operation is this? So I'm going to kind of ignore all of that. I could make an argument for going either way. I just know that at the outset, this path seems, if it holds up, now both of these paths may just diverge off in this direction and I'm screwed. But I'm going to take the left fork in the hopes that it'll continue curling it back around. I want to try to move as close as I can to those comm towers. So I'll mark this as a waypoint, my in and out direction. Again, I apologize for two things. Number one, shooting in the sun. And number two, I have to confess I forgot to bring my ND filters. So, you know, let that be a lesson about proper preparation. So after about 100 yards, it looks like maybe those two paths converged. But I see some blue over there. I don't know, maybe there's yet another fork. Like I said, this is all very confusing. This is the direction I came in. Here's yet another waypoint. I want to show you my marking. This is very hard ground. I don't have any rocks, but you can see I used some dirt clods to mark that I came from this direction. Just enough dirt to leave an arrow here, and then I put another dirt clod at the head of the arrow to mark that. So if I have to backtrack along this path, let's see what it looks at from coming the other direction. Okay, I can remember. It's a little hard to see on the chest camera. That's my arrow, so I came and went this direction, and there's my group of dirt clods. It's not perfect, but it's just enough. And oh yeah, I got a big cow turd to help me mark the whole thing. Ugh. Not exactly the thing I'd like to remember, but you know, take in all the information you can. We've got this tree here. Take a good mental snapshot of this in the event that you have to backtrack. All right, we've got some sort of a merge here into our current path, so I'm going to mark this as a waypoint. The ground's soft, it'll be very easy marking. But I got more blues and orange, and if you don't have a map to put that in context, who knows what that means. There's blue-orange up ahead. You know what? Behind me, I saw one that was yellow. I mean, it's enough to make you throw up your hands and just say, Whiskey Tango Foxtrot. But let's stick with known interpretable quantities. For the first time in a while, the sun is off to my right. That's south-ish. That's the correct orientation. You can't see it. Comm towers are about that way. All of this looks good. And let's scan the territory. What did we see when we first got into this plot of land? We saw cows grazing. What do you see ahead of me? Okay, for the first time in a while, this is starting to look positive. So at this waypoint, we're going to head in that direction, mark our in and out to the waypoint, and continue on. All right, do you remember this? You remember this little kind of a pond here that looks like it's almost evaporated out? That I'll have to do this at night sometime. You could walk right by this at night and never even know it's there. But even more importantly, I hope it shows up on the chest camera. Can you see the arrow here and the arrow there? This is a waypoint. This is where I came in. The sun's in the right direction. I got the grazing cattle. I've got the little plot of trees. This is where I came in, and that's the path I took out to Valley View. So I have very good confirmation that I'm going to go this way to make it back to the truck. Again, I apologize for shooting back into the sun, but I want to make a point. We have a couple gates in front of us. That's probably a road. Is that the right road? Remember when I said we should remember from our starting orientation that with the sun inclined that far south, when I come back to these gates, I should be looking mostly into the sun. That is one thing that helped differentiate us from the other gate. And we look off here, there's our comm towers for confirmation. And as we look a bit further, I don't know if you can see with all the glare. Again, I apologize for shooting back into the sun. There's the truck right there. We made it. No map, no compass, no GPS, no writing material to make an ingress map. Trust me, there's nothing special about this. Get out, practice, realize that the main reason you want to make the ingress map and get as much detail as you can is for instances when you have to backtrack. The more you get out and the more choices you have, the more likely you'll need to backtrack. That's a very important skill. I don't think this was all that difficult an exercise, but we didn't know that that loop was possible. In fact, I actually expected to have to do some backtracking. This time it worked out, next time it may not, but the techniques never vary. You know, the terrain is going to give us pretty much everything we need. The more that we have in terms of land features that we can use for permanent navigation, like those comm towers, the better. But even if we don't have that, we have the sun. We have a couple means to determine direction from the sun, and maybe in a later video I'll show you how to improvise a compass in case neither of those sun-based techniques work. For our final task, and this is the most important one, we get to that truck, we strip off this ruck, stow the rest of the gear, and it's time to go to Buc-ee's to get some coffee.